Happy Friday, everyone, from everybody here at the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, coming to you guys with another good round of stories to talk to. I got a great show planned for you guys today. A lot of crazy deals went down today and just in the last few days, so I'm going to get into that in today's episode. Starting off with the chip shot story of the day. A former NFC South quarterback criticized the deal that Kirk Cousins got lately with the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to get into those comments, what it means coming from said quarterback, and my thoughts on the big deal that Kirk Cousins received from the Atlanta Falcons. Later on, I'm going to be talking about Aaron Donald and his retirement. Suddenly, the announcement drops today, and it throws everything off on what we thought the Rams were going to be, how this defense was going to look, and how the NFC West could play out potentially. I'm going to get into all of that. The Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants are also being looked at, potentially investigated a bit further by the NFL for potentially tampering with the deals that brought them Saquon Barkley and Kirk Cousins as well. So I'm going to get into that and all the minor details, the specific language that is involved with all of that, before I wrap it up with the last segment on the Minnesota Vikings trading back into the first round and accumulating 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. The number 23 overall pick from the Houston Texans, they obtained that on top of the already pick that they already had, the number 11 pick. So I'm going to dive into that. A lot of questions surround that. Potentially drafting a quarterback and moving up in the draft. I'll get into all of that as the show goes on. But before I jump into the chip shot story of the day, I want to remind you guys, as I always do, if you have any questions, comments, or want to just have a conversation involved with any of the topics on any of the segments, please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker below me. The tip and donations link is GSMCPodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to see your question pop up on the chat box to my right. I'm able to interact with you guys, maybe take the conversation in a different direction. It's always more fun to me in that way. So if you're able to do that, it's a great help for this show and all the shows across the network. And we always send a big thank you for you guys to do that. And please remember to like and follow and subscribe the show as well. But that allows me to move into the first segment, the chip shot story of the day, being around Cam Newton, that old Panthers quarterback. A lot of success with the Carolina Panthers, brought him to a Super Bowl, had a great year that year, specifically from Cam Newton and his performances and stuff like that. Now he, like I'm sure you all know, part of the media somewhat. I mean, he has his own show. He talks about the NFL and other topics as well. He has football camps that he does. He's remained active in football, involved in football in some way after he's retired. So that's good to see. And on one of his latest episodes of his show, he was brought the topic of Kirk Cousins and his deal. As we're all aware of, Kirk Cousins got a massive deal from the Atlanta Falcons. 4 years, $180 million for Kirk Cousins, $100 million guaranteed. And once you see those numbers, it takes you back a little bit, obviously, because, it's Kirk Cousins, and that's a lot of money for a guy that's in his almost mid-30s to late 30s. So you might have some questions surrounding that, and Cam Newton certainly did. In his show, he commented on it, and he went straight to the point, didn't really hold anything back when he said, It is extremely alarming that he only had one playoff win in 12 years. He's coming off of an injury. Why didn't they get Justin Fields? I can't make it about me, but if I were to make it about me, it's like I'm in Atlanta. And that was the whole basis of what he said. Then he goes on and jokes on a little bit more with it, saying that, asking rhetorically, who's his agent, who got him all this money at this point in his career. And it is a good point that he brings up. I don't think a lot of people remember or point out the fact that Kirk Cousins hasn't had the most successful playoff career. Even with playing with some of the most talented receivers we've seen in the past few years. Justin Jefferson, now obviously more recent. Before it was Stephon Diggs, and he had those guys playing with him. Maybe not awesome, greatly built teams, but in one position he had one of the best playing with him in Minnesota at one time. So there's that, and you could argue that, a lot of teams don't have a lot of players don't have great playoff resumes. What do you consider a great playoff resume? I know the contract, 4 years, $180 million, would want you to think, this guy is a playoff stud, has been doing it in the league for a while, and Kirk Cousins has been above average, better than decent quarterback. He's been in the upper 12 to 15 range of quarterbacks. I think at least that's minimum for Kirk Cousins. So it's not like he's been a bad player, bad performances. Last year was probably one of his best years of his career until he got hurt. So that's unfortunate to see. But it does give you a bit of optimism looking forward up to what the Falcons could expect. They have a great team, a more balanced team, I think. And if you're looking at Kirk Cousins and how he fits, maybe in the past he obviously was younger, might have had to do a little bit more with his skill set and ability. Now I think it has shifted a little bit because Kirk Cousins has a better overall team. Rather than having one position that's top of the league, best of the best at their position, like a Justin Jefferson or a Kirk Cousins, now I think he has a very good running back, a very promising wide receiver core, a very good tight end, very talented tight end, could be a special tight end if he is used the right way, and their offensive line is good. Tyler Algier is very underrated, I think. So offensively, they're pretty promising, well put together, and defensively, they have some players. They have Bud Dupree, they have AJ Terrell on there, they have Jesse Bates, who's a top 3 safety in this league. You could argue one of the best 2 in this league, just based on last year. So they have a well-put team, a very balanced, good all-around team, compared to his other Vikings teams where the offense was all right, and then at the wide receiver position, it was exceptional. Kirk just had to get it to that guy, force-fed him a lot, you could say, and it brought up the numbers and made everybody's numbers look good just between those two guys. But the rest of the team might have been a little bit lacking, and it might have been just a tier down in terms of where you'd want it to be if you're trying to perform well in the playoffs. And just on top of that, if you want to compare it a little bit with Cam Newton, a lot of people will, if you're a Falcons fan, you might take it a little bit personally when Cam says something like this, already talking down on a new quarterback, kind of dampening your parade. When you're bringing in Kirk Cousins, you want to be excited about it. You hear these comments and you're kind of taking back a little bit, and you're wondering, why is he saying this? Like, who is he to talk about it? And Cam has had a very successful career, I would say, because he's had the attention. On the field, he was almost as unstoppable physically as you want in a quarterback. And in his playoff career, if we're talking about just specifically playoffs, he hasn't had too much playoff success if you're looking at it from just that point of view. In his 11 years, he's had 3 wins between 2014 and 2015, 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in those 2 years. So that's sort of the counter, right? If you're trying to defend the Falcons and this decision, you're looking at Cam and saying, what have you done in the playoffs to speak on this topic about playoff success if you haven't had any? That could be a valid argument, but a counter to that argument could be Cam never received a contract like Kirk has been having in the NFL, and he just received from the Falcons. Cam Newton never got a contract like that. So if you're talking about money and performing to validate that contract, Cam doesn't have to play that much better of a level, because compared to Kirk Cousins, he's getting paid like a Patrick Mahomes level kind of guy, a Josh Allen sort of guy on annual salary. So to validate that, you have to have some playoff success, would be the explanation to that point, bringing up, Cam's never had that kind of contract that Kirk has had. The biggest contract Cam has had in his career was a 5-year, $103 million deal, $60 million guaranteed, and he earned about like $22 million per year. And I understand that the salary cap now, the money now, even in just those few years removed from Cam Newton, has grown a good amount from just that time that Cam retired. But in the same breath, you don't want to just ignore that and say, oh, just because there's more money, we're going to pay all these guys more. It doesn't really work like that. If you're getting a contract like Kirk's getting, which is ultimately my point in all of this, you're going to have a lot of expectations on you, regardless if people will say, it's the Falcons, they're just starting to get there. You can't expect them to be contending for so much in the NFC. But you're getting a contract, 4 years, $180 million. That's the biggest thing for me. If you're this organization, you have to have full confidence in Kirk to bring you to the level of contending for the NFC championship, potentially divisional round. I could see divisional round. I would expect him to win one playoff game with this team, with Kirk Cousins, because that's what I would want to see if I'm a GM, if I'm giving out this contract, if I'm an owner, a coach. I'm giving you all this money, $100 million guaranteed. You can't win me one playoff game with the talent that everyone's been hyping the Falcons up with. That's the kind of expectation everyone expects, and people are going to be ready to jump on this team, or going to be ready to criticize Kirk Cousins a lot if he's not playing up to his standard, if he's looking a little bit rusty because of that Achilles injury. People are going to be ready. They're already have their hands drawn to their comments, their negative comments. So that's where I'm coming at from all of this. I don't think it's a bad move. I think Kirk fits into that system the best. The only thing I had a question was about that contract and how much money you're going to guarantee a 34 to 35-year-old quarterback. I mean, it's already done now. I expect him to be very good in the NFC, but I'm just saying people have been hyping up this team a lot, and they haven't really been talking about the pressure that Kirk and this team could feel because of that money given to them. And if it's not proven, then the whole situation with this team looks a bit off. Whoever made that decision is going to come into question, and it's all going to not fall apart, but a lot more people are going to dissect it under a microscope and really try to nitpick all these things wrong with it other than the money. So that's kind of what's at stake here. I don't agree fully with what Cam said. He's had his comments. He brought it up. That's fair. But you just have to wait and see with all of this, with most of this. And I'm rooting for the Falcons. I think they'll be decent. I'm just saying there's a lot riding on Kirk. And once it goes bad, it could get worse. And that's where people start coming out with all these different things and different narratives to nitpick at. So we're going to see where that ends up. Interesting comments from Cam to just say it. He's never shy about saying it, so I wanted to talk about it. But moving on with the show and moving on with the next topic, after the break that's coming up, I'm going to dive into the situation regarding the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants, how the NFL could potentially be investigating them more and more regarding the tampering phase and the potential tampering actions that they've conducted with acquiring Saquon Barkley and Kirk Cousins. More on that topic on the other side of this break. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.